The part, and I think this is going to be a fairly short one because this is just an update.
I'll make a motion to move into executive session at 1:06.
Second.
Can I make the comment that before people leave, all these voting,
So we welcome, I think, our next item on our, I think I should repeat that we came out of executive session at 1:19 by a motion moved by Harry Fisher, second by Leslie Moriarty, and that was unanimous. So our next item on our agenda is CD1 for the Community Development Block Grant Department, and it's $5,000 for an additional appropriation for a CDBG grant. Welcome, Tyler Fairbairn.
Thank you very much, the members of the Budget Committee, for having me on the agenda today. This is a bit unusual for me. This is usually only in May that I see you guys for our CDBG grant, but we're preparing to do our consolidated 5-year plan, which will be the next CDBG cycle, which when we did it last time required some help from a consultant due to the vast nature of the research and preparation that has to go into that document. So in an effort to free up a little additional funding for the Community Development Office, which is mostly self-sustaining through the CDBG grant that we get annually, we were requesting an additional $5,000 that has typically in the past been set aside to be reprogrammed for our nonprofit groups, but unfortunately, as CDBG is reduced further and further every year, our administrative budget is reduced further and further every year. We're limited to 20% of whatever it is we get from the federal government, so that amount continues to go down through no fault of the towns, just by nature of demographics throughout the country and who's getting however much. So we've requested an additional $5,000. This is something that we plan to do as a routine course of business moving forward now with the CDBG program. So we will incorporate this into the process we do in May when we meet with you guys. But this year we had to do it a little bit ahead of time. So that $5,000 is funding that comes in from repayment from the Housing Authority for a CDBG loan that was made years ago. I believe it was initially in the 90s, and then it was restructured in 2016 to make it a little easier for them to repay it. So that money is coming into the town for the next 22 years, barring any other changes. And that was going to be the source of the money that we're going to shift into the administrative budget for the coming year, current year rather.
Super, thank you. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, it just occurs to me that when we do CDBG stuff, we have public hearings. Is reprogramming something?
I think we've reprogrammed a couple times before. I don't remember a public hearing when we've reprogrammed money, and I think we have reprogrammed in the past.
Yeah, so we
Not for this particular type of item, but other items when there's been whatever.
Yeah, so when we do it as part of the annual process, it's kind of two things. So we do the public hearings anyway because we want the public's input on the action plan, and then we have a threshold of $25,000 where if we change the nature or scope of the activities, or if there's anything over $25,000, we'll do a public hearing. But for something minor, we are not required to do that.
Just checking. Thank you.
No, it's a good question.
Good question.
And just clarification, these funds are, that the $5,000 covered by these funds have not already been allocated to a project. This is going forward what would be coming in and part of next year's request.
Exactly.
The BET and RTM, do you need to vote on that as well? It says resolution of the town of Greenwich, and it says that the following is a true and correct copy of a resolution adopted by BET and RTM at its duly called and held meeting.
So it sounds like we have to approve that too. So, but we'll wait, and we'll do this afterwards.
Let me
We'll
just-
separate the functions.
I'm gonna look at this to see if there was a standing resolution that we could accept the money without going to the RTM. And she didn't think there was. So which is why it's going to the RTM.
But Karen, you're saying the resolution package, and I didn't see it. Do you know
I
what
didn't see
page
it.
it's on?
There's, as part of the package that was forwarded to us, if you look in the section D, authorizing resolution, it names both the BET and RTM as part of that resolution.
So, oh, I see it.
And it's
Okay, so
authorizing the first selectman, Fred Camillo, to enter
page
into
four-
whatever.
It's page 14 of the PDF package for today's meeting. But this apparently was filled in probably by Amina, my guess is, right? So it's surprising that she would have included the BET if we don't have that.
Well, it's not, it's
responsibility.
giving, it's basically giving, it's to, throughout this. It's giving the first selectman, Fred Camillo, authorization to direct and execute and deliver any documents on behalf of the town of Greenwich, in addition to the other things that are necessary to create to the terms of the documents. So I don't think it's just accepting the grant.
No, well, they're requiring a resolution to approve that whoever's accepting it has the authority to accept it, right? So filling in the blank was where it was filled in with BET and RTM. And it says it's for the,
Well, it says, "I do hereby certify that the following is a true and correct copy of a resolution adopted by the BET and RTM at its duly called and held meeting on whatever day, and which a quorum was present and acted throughout, and that the resolution has been modified, rescinded, or revoked, and has not been modified, rescinded, or revoked, and is part of, and in full force and effect." So.
let me ask the question, though. What we're looking at, though, is a document prepared. Was this submitted as part of the application upon
I don't
which
know.
we're
It's a
being
good
given to
question.
it? Or is it just something, the form filled out by our staff to be prepared to accept it? Because it's filled out incorrectly. It says BETM. Now, the BET, I guess, can vote on it. We're
I-
not given that authority.
I'm not sure we need to figure this out
I
on the
think,
fly.
well, you know what I would do? Okay, first I would recommend that we continue with Leslie's motion to approve the appropriation of
Yes.
$25,000 to purchase this trailer and the needed accessories or other things, okay?
Right.
But Leslie, you want to put it in your words?
Well, I'm looking at my wording to see if it's still applicable. I think it is to appropriate $25,000 for the purchase of emergency trailers and
Supplies.
supplies, subject to the RTM's acceptance of the grant.
And I seconded that.
Now, I don't want that to be limiting that it comes back that the BET has to sign something, but we have a few days
one
to
at a
figure
time.
that out.
Let's just
Okay,
say whatever.
those in favor of the motion made by Leslie, seconded by Harry, for the appropriation for the trailer and supplies, as worded by Leslie, 400. And do we think this is routine? The answer is yes.
Yes.
So
So
you
at this
all
point,
agree?
I would,
Whoa, all agree?
yes.
Okay, so now let's have a separate motion that we approve this resolution. After the fact, we can determine whether it's needed or not, but at least the approval's in place, and then people don't have to come back.
And Leslie, just to answer your question, it was part of an application, but it's saying that it was done. So I don't recall that we ever passed the resolution to begin with. So I think you do need to pass some sort of resolution, since it's basically reaffirming that this is a true copy of a resolution that was passed.
Okay, so
I'll make the motion
that's what I meant.
to approve the resolution for acceptance of the grant.
And I'll second that and suggest that it could also be routine, but it's also problematic because it says BET and RTM on a date held. So-
You can certainly modify the BET on whatever date and the RTM by whatever date.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be straightened out. So Roland, I guess that falls in your,
So for acceptance of
Monday.
the grant with, or as discussed, how's that? Does that cover the issues?
No, that can't be a motion.
No, it can't be a motion.
Can't be a motion. Just, I would say, acceptance of the grant. I think the details on the paperwork
Yeah,
will comply
approve
with
the
that
resolution.
approval.
we approve the
Approve the
resolution, the
resolution.
details of the paperwork to be worked out.
For acceptance of the grant with the details of the paperwork to be worked out
Before Monday.
before Monday. No, with details of paperwork to be finalized.
Correct. Yeah, before Monday's not in the motion.
To be finalized. Okay. So Leslie moved it.
Second.
Harry Fisher seconded it. Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that motion passed 4-0-0, and the motion on the resolution was also routine?
Yep.
Okay. So, thank you very much, Joe. We've done a little paperwork here. We need to fix our paperwork for Monday's meeting. So, thank you.
Great.
Good to
Thank
see
you so
you.
much for your time tonight, seeing you.
Yep. So, our next item on our agenda is our economic report. So it's really great to have our economic report back. And Roland, would you like to run through highlights of the economic report?
On the revenue side, of course, the main increase year over year is the increase in taxes. Interest income is still ahead, but you can see month to month to month, it's dropping off. See where it ends up. Building permits are still good. And one thing that we don't have is the $600,000 of the penalties for the early sale of the properties that were identified as, I guess, forest properties or something like that, which we got last year, which we hadn't had in a long time.
Okay. Right.
And on the expenses, the biggest favorable difference is the timing of the interdepartmental transfers. Where, we send the money to, for example, the Z fund for the capital that's paid for taxes, and all of those other transfers out. Other than that, there's not much going on yet.
So it's just, it's only a timing issue,
Yeah.
okay? Because it doesn't look good.
Well, it looks
Price
ve-
of-
it's very good,
Okay.
because we didn't make the payments in the first quarter like we did last. We didn't make the transfers.
Okay. So why would we do it one year and not the other? Just,
It almost doesn't matter when we transfer this. Sometimes we do it in January, sometimes we get it all out of the way at the beginning of the year.
okay, super. So do we have any questions on this page? Harry?
Yeah, the BOE salaries, what, can you expand on that? Is that cabinet, M&C, or is it
It's a-
teachers or all levels?
It's across the board. The salaries, the temps, it's across the board.
Okay, thank you.
So our next would be the sheet on conveyance, building permits, and interest. Do we need to look at that? Is there any further comments on that page?
Yeah, I'll just note that I got a friend of mine sent a real estate report that inventory is at another historic low for properties in Greenwich. So the market is probably going to continue to be a bit frozen. So conveyance tax may not meet expectations, but we just have to watch.
One big sale.
We've been saying this for a year, you
Well,
know.
I know, they had
month
the
after
Trump,
month,
the old
month after
Trump
month.
property,
But
but
we do have the $30 million plus sale coming in from that property. But
yeah, that's true.
But it's, the sales seem to go on, and so far, things have been good. It seems like we're looking good, at least so far, year to date. And building permits seem to be strong, right, Roland?
Yep.
And as you pointed out, interest is remaining high, and in fact, we have about $800,000 more in year-to-date this year than we did last year. So if one wants to look at the revenue report, one better ask Roland for an updated copy. So, is there anything anything else you want to highlight on the detail pages, Roland, on terms of expenses? Any departments?
The title of that's through September, revenue
It's-
comparison?
It's September to September, yes.
Yeah, it says May.
No, that is not a correct
not-
report. That's why I said,
Oh, you're-
the revenue ones doesn't seem to be a correct report. The expenses seems to be a correct report. The revenue seems to be reporting, and I don't know why we got, yeah.
I just have the wrong title.
No, I think actually, don't we have some of the wrong, we actually collected a lot of those a lot of those revenues last year. I think maybe it's the whole thing. But
It could
that's
be.
what confused us when we were looking at the
Okay.
bridge reports.
I'll resend it.
So that can be updated next month or whenever. We don't really need that. And no other comments on, I guess the point was brought up about the Board of Education. Okay, so moving on. Our next is our fiscal year 26 budget guidelines. And Roland, I see that you brought large format copies of the estimated numbers. Do you want to hand those out, please?
Leslie, I know you're going to do this, but before we start this conversation, I think I do want to make it clear to those listening that
I haven't, I'm just asking to hand out, I'll speak.
I just want to say, you're going to confirm that you only distributed this to committee members within the past 24 hours.
Although I
And-
don't think there's been any changes since you saw it several weeks ago.
This with the document, the guidelines
Correct.
together
We
are the
did-
budget guidelines, and it was only distributed 24 hours, so it doesn't reflect a committee input. This is a draft input from the chair to the rest of the committee. I just want to make that clear. Do you disagree?
Well, I think that fact is correct, but that you had seen, and we had met with Roland on this several weeks ago.
Doesn't reflect my input, it reflected our, I was
Okay,
told what
thank
was
you.
on here.
So Roland, let's talk about how this was put together, because while you say it's my input, actually, a lot of it is just the facts that have been laid out. So Roland, maybe you could run through, beginning with the 100s and operating costs. They were put together, yes, with my discussion, with whatever, but they represent the salaries as we have seen in union contracts at exactly the same headcount as we have, right? And it includes steps, and you want to just kind of run through these and the key items.
Well, it would look like with the, on the non-certified, it looked like, as we were doing the contracts for the labor negotiations, it looked like 3% was pretty much what the increases were going to be with the GWIs and the steps. And since the other salary items, overtime, temporaries, all get the same increases, they all stayed at 3%.
So,
And then
and I think, Roland, you're familiar with this, and also I think you checked in with Michael Mason, our labor negotiator, correct?
we saw that we used the contracts, yes.
Right.
And the other items, the supplies and maintenance, we just did 2.75% across the board.
Which is up, last year I believe we did 2.5.
Yes. And then the utilities is something we'll be looking at with the public benefit charge, seeing how much of that goes away at the end of this fiscal year and how much stays with it in 25, 26. So that's something we're going to continue to look at.
But I think, it looks like at least what we knew at the time was reflecting that, because the cost of the supply, the actual energy itself, was contracted to be at lower rates than we had last year. And so this was the rate that came in from the town's energy consultant, with a lot of work from Renata, our head of purchasing.
And if we go to the fixed charges, it shows a 7% increase, and that is assuming a 5% increase in just the general health care increase and a 2% premium for Fairfield County. So that's how we got to the 7%. Today we saw maybe a recommendation of 8 to 10 at this point. If we get better numbers in November, we'll certainly plug those in.
OPEB?
OPEB, we left flat. We don't have any information yet. We got preliminary information on the pension, and I believe we took that down about $1 million. And we'll know at the end of this month, right, Pete?
Yeah, maybe this week,
This week, that early?
hopefully.
Oh, good.
This is for the retirement. The retirement is, that number was a little high. The trailing equity came in plus $1 million, so that might come down a little bit. The OPEB, we don't use, the reason is that they have to have the actuary report presentation for this month. So it's got to be ready. Hopefully, we'll have a number this week. And OPEB usually trails it by about a month, but I don't see any surprises. OPEB is doing well investment-wise.
The performance, I think investment performance has been
Correct.
strong, right?
Yeah, well, it's exceptional for this year, the first 3 months. It was reported to the IAC yesterday. But we'll have numbers this week. Hopefully, if so, they can be reported by Monday for the retirement and OPEB.
The other items that are on here
Roland, your mic is on.
is the contribution to Nathaniel Witherall. There's again a $500,000 contribution for the 25-26 operations, and then the $5 million is for prior year losses.
And the prior year losses is the number that at least was the best number that you and Pete had estimated from our auditors when we put this together, correct? I mean, that's still the best number
Right.
that we're aware of, plus or minus very close to 5 million.
And what's,
But I'd like to make the comment on Nathaniel Wither on the 500,000 contribution, is that's a policy decision by members of, by first selectman recommendation and members of this board, trying to estimate what the financial impact is. When it's too low, as it has been in the past couple of years, we still have to fund it. We're just paying it in arrears, and that's not good financial planning. And I think that there's a policy signal, too, that doesn't necessarily reflect what's reality.
Well, I think that deserves further. I think Nathaniel Witherell was supposed to come back to the budget committee in September, and it wasn't ready. And then we said we'd come back in October, and it wasn't ready. And now I think
Hopefully
we understand,
November.
hopefully November. So yes, I agree. It's like several of these other things that we really need to get a better handle and understand. I think their commitment was that they would demonstrate to us how they would achieve a break-even operation by December 31. I believe that's
Before debt and capital.
before debt and capital. That was an add-on. And we must also add, since you've made that point, it's also before their costs of any other services in any other department, such as HR, purchasing, the law department, and they paid no cost of real estate. The risk fund?
there is no contribution for the risk fund in here. If we have to pay $1.5 million for the one settlement, That'll leave us about $500,000, and by the end of this fiscal year, it'll be whatever, maybe smaller items, the $50,000 to $70,000 claims that we're going to pay out of it. So we're going to be pretty low by the end of this fiscal year if we don't put anything in.
And it had been prior BET policy to keep that at a higher level, again, recognizing that that's a cost of doing business to the town, and we should be allocating appropriate funds into that category. This board hasn't added it used to be at about $3 million level. We can discuss what the right level is, but probably running it to zero is not good financial planning.
So, let's add a couple other points to that. At the time that we had that policy, we could include the risk fund, et cetera, in our fund balance policy. But at the last fund balance policy, whatever, I think it's the last one, restructuring, the ancillary funds are no longer included in that calculation. And in addition, we know, just the same way as Witherall, that what we could do is carry out for the year and fund it retroactively. I think that this is also, a matter of, I'm not sure why that decision was made, because as you point out, it impacted other policies that we had. But I just want to make sure that along with what you said, we add the other points here too.
Well, this is a longer discussion about fund policy. It should be in our Debt and Fund Balance Policy Committee, which has not yet been called to action or to meet. However, the credit rating agencies are going to calculate it the way they calculate it, right? So that fund balance policy was changed because the way internal members of the RTM and the community and the BET were evaluating where we are and how we're using fund balance. And the budgetary fund balance was the definition that most people related to. They saw, we've got a fund balance of $70 million. We're using $30 million, $25 million to cover a budget hole as we're forecasting. And so what does that leave us left in a rainy day fund? That by allocating funds to a risk fund, we are acknowledging that the cost of doing business will be litigation and potential settlements and litigation. And so I guess I do believe that running a risk fund down to zero is not a good financial planning and is not really proper methodology.
So adding to your additional points, I will also add, the reason we put a fund balance policy in place is because the rating agencies wanted a fund balance policy. And that's when we were running a negative fund balance, and they couldn't understand it. We were doing our own internal accounting. And so they wanted, and this fund balance was determined using, GASB, GAAP accounting. And so, as you point out, at the last decision for the fund balance, it became an internal thing rather than external. And we moved from, the GASB accounting to, internal accounting. But nevertheless, the rating agencies still expect it to be determined differently than we determine it, and we need to make sure we understand the differential between the two. Okay, Roland, next point.
The other fixed charges, it's everything else. It's the Social Security, workers' comp. We increased that 3% because it kind of goes along with the general wage increases in the labor contracts that are just approved this quarter. The 401k contributions that the town makes for the voluntary part of it is going up slightly. So this, at this point, 3% is as good as anything. The capital tax levy we're showing going up $3 million. In this, the debt service.
You skipped an important line to calculate that whole capital, which is the projects level.
Well, I was going
We'll come
to
to
end
that.
up
Okay.
with there because I'm going with the things that I know. The debt service is the same. We're going to borrow $40 million this January, and $40 million from 5 years ago is dropping off. So it's going to be the same, other than at whatever change in interest rates we have from this January to the prior one.
Question about the anticipated debt that we'll put out in January. The cash flow from Central Middle School isn't requiring, with the other projects, isn't requiring more than $40 million aggregate cash needs for projects? And
That'll be in the bands.
There would be a spike, the rollover in the bands is 75 million. The spike from CMS and potentially as much smaller for the old Greenwich will be in the bands. When I get the updated, most current cash flows from Mr. Rossetti, the 75 is going to go over 100 million. So you still have 2 more years after this year where the debt service spike is going to kick in. But it's going to be in the bands as far as the large increase.
my mistake, thank you.
So, well, Pete mentioned Mr. Rossetti. Mr. Fisher is also our BET member on the CMS Building Committee, so you need to keep track of those cash flows to make sure that they're realistic from our perspective.
Yeah, a lot of
Whatever they
that,
are, I'm not, you know.
yeah, a lot of that is going to be dependent, the bids, we'll know by mid-November how the bids come in. It's out for bid at the present. But a lot of that cash flow, I believe, is taken from JLO and Turner Construction, and those people will be generating the numbers. But yes, I need to keep an eye on it. And there'll be a committee forming to watch out for change orders and all of that sort of stuff. I'll be on that committee. So I'm going to be having a close eye on this stuff.
You're going to be a very busy person.
I'm going to be a very busy boy.
Pete, can I just follow up? You said, Mr. Rossetti, are you working with Mr. Waters also to get a handle on Old Greenwich? I think that will be one that, or is that going to lag here a bit so that we're not as concerned in the
My immediate
issue.
goal is to finish the audit, as far as the financial report. I've already contacted Bill Lindsay, the financial advisor. My goal is to touch base with both of them, Mr. Waters and Mr. Rossetti, the beginning of November. We're putting the package together for borrowing in November, so that's when I will need the cash flows.
And then I think, likewise, while I called out Mr. Fisher, I think we need to make sure that Mr. Selps, who's not present, but maybe he's on the TV, also focuses in on the importance of looking at these numbers too.
But we haven't skipped over, or we have the capital projects number.
Right,
I just
so-
want to point out issues here, as well as the capital tax levy.
Yeah, the contribution to the sewer is pretty much flat. And that leaves us to the current year projects of $60 million. The number that was in 25, 26 in the current year budget was about $88 million. So this is about $28 million reduction from that 5-year plan.
And why was that reduction made? Was that your
So-
recommendation? No, that was Ms.
So
Tarken's.
that was, yes, and quite frankly, I talked with others about these numbers. I didn't do this by myself, and laid out, while, and this is a lessons learned, and this is something that we have to do differently in our budget as we move ahead with our budget days in February. We need to not only look at lessons learned, fiscal year 26, but also look ahead to 27. Because when you look ahead at what's happened to 26, when we approved it in 25, was projects moved out or whatever. So there have been no overall reduction in the number. It's just spread out into additional years. So spread out into fiscal year 27, spread out to fiscal year 28, and finally for a smaller amount into fiscal year 30. And additional funds were put into the 5-year plan. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands it isn't that they've been eliminated. from the capital plan. They've just been readjusted since it was very lumpy, and we've approved substantial projects, and they're going to need a lot of attention, assistance, and help. I mean, I think we know what one large project can do, and we now really have multiple projects that need to be attended to.
Philosoph-
We know that per the book, the five-year planning book, in fiscal year '29, we violate the state statute in terms of projects funded by taxes. Now, I don't know, again, I only got this material last night. So I have to look and see what those projects are that reduces us from 88 to 60. But as you just mentioned, those projects don't disappear. They simply get deferred by this logic a year or two. What's staring us in the face and what has been staring us in the face over the last several years is the cliff that we reach in fiscal year '29, that if it isn't funded now, will wreak havoc in the budget. And so the notion of a $3 million increase in the capital tax levy doesn't work at all, because it doesn't alleviate the violation of law that is hitting us inevitably in fiscal year '29.
So I think that this, brings up a very good point, David, in terms of how we look at it, and certainly get a little, I expected this little talk from you, but anyway, we really need to begin to look at our grants, collecting our grants, how not double counting grants and debt. I think, I remember back to our discussion a couple months ago on the Round Hill Firehouse, and Leslie was surprised that we appropriated our debt to the inclusive of the state grant that would be coming in order to do our appropriations. So in many cases, we've got debt on here that hopefully we will never use, and we need to have a much better, process for our cash flows. Quite frankly, I don't believe we should be doing this. I think we need to have others work on this with us. And it also points out, David, which isn't on the sheets, but the fact that a grant process needs to be fixed. I mean, you talk about, the debt, but a grant process. Leslie and I met with DPW a couple weeks ago, and our town engineer very kindly, and this was very positive, indicated that we were going to get $2 million more on older grants, and that was working on the grant process. And I believe she said that the money had actually come in. And is that correct, Leslie? And so, the problem is, she also said that these are older grants. Well, there's problems and advantages and disadvantages. These are older grants, but it was, including back to 2004, which is 20 years ago. That's our DPW. And so, the fact that we're still out there seeking repayment on these grants, and, I would like to thank her very much for working on these kind of details, is disappointing that we don't have a process in place that catches these, and even worse, we're closing out these projects without ever, somehow having a process to make sure that we collect the grants that we were promised when we appropriated the funds. And so, I've been saying this for years, we need a bridge grant report and process, and I think that this is critically important. I want to also just say, grants, now we move to the Board of Education just to make sure it isn't just the town, but the fact that we still haven't collected the grants as far back as Hamilton Avenue School, which has a cornerstone of 2008, but we can go through the other projects too, is very disappointing. Now, the good news is that, on the bridge grant money, when it comes in, because these are so long ago, and on the same thing with Hamilton Avenue School, those are general fund projects. So that when that money finally comes in, it will be actually helping our fund balance. And that will be a very positive thing for us. So other grants that come in help to reduce our debt. And, that probably will never be borrowed. So, we need to work on these processes, and hopefully, maybe this is something that the audit committee can really get a much better handle on. And I've been looking forward to this audit that's been upcoming. And, as Pete can say, confirm, I keep saying, when are we going to have the audit and when are we going to have our process? And I know they're working on it, so I'm not, I see Matt's hand up and,
Thanks, Leslie. Just real quick, I completely agree with you with respect to your comments on the grant reimbursement process. But to me, that's one element underneath a larger heading, which is I thought this, the BET as a general body agreed that we were going to have a review of the entire capital budgeting process. We talked about this many times, and we've agreed as a group that this is a serious issue. And I don't hear any discussion about when we're going to have that meeting, what that date is, who's going to be there, what the topic is, what's the agenda. And we're heading into another budget cycle, and we're not doing that work. And then I see this report here, which, if I'm reading it right, I'll admit I don't fully understand the process here, how this happens, but the current year projects go from 92 million to 60 million. That's $32 million of reduction. Do you have corresponding borrowing reductions? Is there details that you talked about the capital, the 5-year? Is there details around what drives these numbers and what caused these spreading out, as you call it, of these payments?
So if you remember, Matt, I don't have all my numbers laid out like this because I just thought this was going to be a really quick discussion. We're not prepared to go too far today. But remember, in fiscal year 2025, 24, we included also the interims of fiscal year 25. If I got the right years here? So we did 2 large projects. We approved Central Middle School and we approved Old Greenwich School in addition to the capital plan. So, in this upcoming year, Matt, we aren't aware of any of those large projects that would be coming into this fiscal year. So, you can break that down between the interims and and what's in the budget. And since you raised this, I will also make another point, which has also been one of my hot buttons, is that we don't do a very good job of our interim capital project approvals. And we need to get a much better handle on that. And if you go back and look at these, we don't, I've been saying for years, we need to have blue sheets, the actual CIP sheets on each of these projects. We're approving them with like an estimated, budget at how many dollars per square foot. And then when you get to the final, the numbers for the square feet and the other numbers are different. So we need a very defined, interim capital project approval process. Maybe not for the little ones, but certainly when we get to these big major projects.
When will we have this discussion that you're basically effectively making the case that we ought to have a review of all of these issues, which are many. You're criticizing, and I think in many ways correctly, the process that we're using for capital budgeting. We've all agreed as a group that we need to improve in this area. We've discussed this many times, but we don't have a meeting set up.
So I'm going to, I see Harry's hand is up, but yes, I don't mean to criticize. I just want to create opportunities for improvement. Matt, we're 12 BET members. Each of us are doing, as much as we can, but there's a lot of work to be done as the town grows. And so, yes, you're bringing up good points, and all these points that everyone's bringing up are good points, but they also need some detail and to work on them. And I did call on Harry. I'm happy to come back to you.
I just would make 2 comments here. One is, the perspective on history here is we've had 2 years of very large capital budgets. And I, for one, think it's time to take a breather, slow it down, make sure that the town system can handle all of these projects. And it's not just in the general fund. It's, let's not forget we've got a $22 million pumping station in the sewer improvement fund. That's not here. The other comment I would make is I've had a lot of discussions with the first selectman, and I've brought in the new town administrator, Kate Bush, to say that, you know, we've clearly got a capital planning process in his office that has not really worked. 15 years was, you know, is too long. 5 years makes sense. And I've pointed out that, you know, we've had a lot of bad estimates. That's why you see in the budget guidelines narrative that there's, you know, we've really got to get control over the numbers. Otherwise, it's garbage in, garbage out. And, you know, I'd also make another point, I guess, is that Mr. Weisbrod's comments about the emerging, you know, debt bubble out in 29 or so is just, you know, is another reason to slow it down for a year, and really get a grip on the amount of capital that the town has to expend. And we've got other projects looming out there. And it's, you know, we've got the feasibility study on Riverside School undergoing, and we have no idea what that number's going to be. So that's why I've argued it stay at zero until we have some hard information. I think it's a better process and procedure.
I think that Matt had his hand up
I'm gonna
again.
I'll
and
defer to
then, And then Leslie, I'm sorry?
I just, you know, this board has had many of these issues in front of us for years, and let's take the blame. We're not addressing them, we're not forcing conclusion, and it's coming back to hit us now because we have had several years of large capital. History is because we had many years of underfunding capital, right? So they were playing catch up. To say we're going to slow it down again, to me, is not necessarily the right answer here, because we're just going to create additional problems and projects are going to get even more expensive. There are some things maybe, other things maybe not, but this is a precise process. We're starting to, we're identifying a big issue in this town that this board, if it's not going to take the lead on solving, somebody else has, but we have to solve and identify what, as a financial profile, we can and can't do moving forward. And you have to start with understanding where we are, and we don't have a good understanding of where we are. There's lots of things about grant reimbursements, small detail, lots of things about timing of projects, very old capital open appropriations, some of which departments are just holding because they can. Other appropriations are being held because the projects are delayed, and we need better information on all of that. But in communicating what these budget guidelines are intending to do, or I think there's two different ways we go. We're either going to tell them the budget guidelines are going to stipulate a capital level you can't exceed and are going to stipulate an operating level you can't exceed, or they're going to be, as we've done several times before, this is what we know today. We need you to, in your responsibilities as department heads, as first selectmen, tell us what it is you need in a fiscally conservative way, looking at your budgets carefully, but tell us what it is you need to deliver the services and programs we expect, the facilities in the correct quality and maintenance that we expect, and what we need to plan for coming down the pike. And one document's going to give us actionable information, the other one is not. But that guidelines right now, and these aren't guidelines, this is Ms. Harkington's draft of what she wants to see here, using the prior formats that we've had before, but are not doing either. It's kind of a little bit of both, and they're not presenting the information, a declarative statement on what the departments can and can't do. They look to us for guidance. Last year, they didn't get any guidance, really. And so it's very frustrating to be sitting here, right, in October, when we should be approving guidelines in October and talking about the basics, but also not having taken advantage of opportunity of time to address the big elephant in the room, which is capital. And so we're going to be playing catch-up again through the budget process, unless we're doing something different. But this board just needs to do a better job, all of us.
And one of the issues here is, Leslie, is that we've had a lot of interims, and they're no longer in our capital plan. And, we get them for,
To fix that.
I'm sorry?
I mean, we can fix that. The numbers are in here in terms of what's previously been approved. You don't have, a scope sheet, you have different documentation. You're not talking about documentation, though. You're going back to, you want to approve all the projects one day a year, which is,
Or at least balance them into a capital plan. We don't have a capital plan that really rotates through the months. We have a capital plan that works once a year. And, and yet we're getting a flood of large interim projects in as interims. And, I just think about things like Old Greenwich and Central Middle School, which we talked about, the Round Hill Firehouse, et cetera, et cetera. And, in the last budget, we got, a third fire engine that we're ordering for this year. And in addition, we got a new triple intersection traffic plan just because a grant came in. And so, there's been encouragement to get these grants. They're coming in now. But people say, oh, gee, I got my grant. Now I have to go get my approval. So, and it's happening and operating, as we saw today, as well as capital. So, yeah, there's a lot to do. And, but in the meantime, just let me finish one sentence. There isn't anyone on this committee that I'm aware of that hasn't been doing a tremendous amount of work in the period since the last budget was approved. And, I think there's only so many things that this group can do, and there are issues that need to be handled and thought about, and I think they need to be thought about in a very thoughtful, precise manner.
Yeah, so I do agree with that. I do. And I think the BET has proven itself incapable, sadly, but truthfully, of addressing the capital planning for the community. We just haven't been able to do it. We've tried, we all mean well, but it hasn't worked. And it's been the source of, it's like Groundhog Day every year, the same discussion, tiresome. The only thing that is a fact is what's staring at us in the capital planning book, which is that we hit a cliff. Now, if we stop funding projects, the cliff alleviates. If we reject projects, the cliff alleviates us. There are many ways to come to grips with that. But what is evident from all the comments I've just heard is that it's not within the capacity of the BET to address the questions that have come up. We just can't do it. So I have approached the first selectman, anticipating that we would have this impasse, and said, listen, we need this handled in a different way. Whether he creates a separate committee, because after all, the capital planning is really in the charter under the auspices of the first selectman. I mean, we're here to approve the financing, but the plan itself belongs to the first selectman's office. And so I did approach the first selectman and asked him to consider putting together a separate committee, an advisory committee that would evaluate all of these things, whether it be tallying up the grants, whether it be putting firmer numbers on the projects, whether it be including the interims, which we can't seem to do this. We don't seem to succeed, whether it be choosing more carefully which projects are included in the plan and sifting and sorting to eliminate some. We haven't been able to do that. We can't. So it needs to be done elsewhere. And I've gone to him and to see whether he can put a different set of eyes on this through his efforts so that we can get the work that we need to get done. That's my take.
Harry?
Yeah, I would just point out that's not an entirely new idea. the town used to have such a committee under.
No, I'm not saying it's
under,
new.
under Mr. Lash. And in discussing it after you discussed it with Mr. Camillo, I suggested he avail himself of the fact that Jim Lash is still around, find out his perspective on how it worked or didn't work, and, you know, what lessons we could learn from the past before we just jump ahead on something like that. So, you know, I think we want to be clear about the nomenclature here. A lot of what you, Mr. Weisbrot, have been speaking about is the responsibility of the Budget Committee and the BET for capital financing plans. Planning for the capital budget and capital projects is in the first selectman's office, so I don't want the public to be confused that it's up to the BET to plan capital projects. It really isn't. It's up to us to judge them as they come before us and to figure out how best to finance them.
So I think these are all. David's made some good points. I think Harry's made some good points. The charter is very clear. I think that the charter was amended, you know, way back. I think it was actually pre-Lash. I think it was, who was it? I'm going to have to, Dick Bergstresser and the Republican budget director. Anyway, I think that process was put in place back then for a decade. I think Peter Tessie also had a CIP process with people involved. I think formalizing a committee, I'm not really supportive of. I think that we have a lot of committees and things need to come back to whatever, you know, charter entities we have, and that is our process. But clearly, thinking it out, figuring out how we can do it within that context, I think would be very constructive. I mean, you know, look, you know, this is not perfect. I think we're all saying that, and we're all saying it in our own different ways, each one of us. So, Roland, I think we can move on. No, that's not the end. We need some revenues.
Right, so the use of fund balance is, I guess, the next item, and it's flat from what it was last year. In the prior years, we would use fund balance, and then we would use additional fund balance for the prior year losses at Nathaniel Witherell. In the 24-25 budget, we had $2.3 million for the prior year losses. In this upcoming budget, we're right now showing $5 million and only 2.3 out of fund balance for that, which means we're taxing for the $2.7 million. The revenues, the other revenues we have.
That's a very good point, Roland. Thank you.
The revenues, the other revenues are flat. You know, we know that we're not going to get things like interest income in 25, 26 like we have been getting, but you know, we made $9 million in interest income. We budgeted 6, I believe, or 6.5. Okay. So even if the interest declines, I think from budget to budget, we'll be okay with things like that.
Can I ask a question back on fund balance? Because in several budget cycles now, we've gotten the comment from our staff that the use of fund balance is getting to be very high and is not sustainable. And yet, in this current document, we're keeping it at that level. I believe our fund balance at the end of fiscal '24 was flat, but that benefited from moving interest income from the capital fund into the general fund. So it would have declined without that extra interest income, which we're not really forecasting will occur.
Was that ARPA? It wasn't ARPA, it wasn't from the capital fund.
The ARPA fund.
I think
Yeah,
we
it was
still have,
moved into the general
I
fund.
think we still have more ARPA left.
No, ARPA's the current year.
But it's a long-winded way of asking about the, you know, even including in this potential Exhibit 1 of the $23.8 million that we have here, how comfortable are you keeping that number at that level?
I can't, it's too early to tell.
Okay.
One of the surprises each year is the interim appropriations. We had over $3 million last year. That's one of the ones that, for example, if I said today we're gonna break even, and then we have $3 million in interims, we're negative $3 million. But it's too early to tell as far as performance. To Roland's point, I talked to Natasha, the interest income is gonna come down off of that 9 million by a couple million. You spoke before about conveyance tax. Harry mentioned about the inventory being low. Building permit activity looks like it's going to be flat. The only surprises is going to be the interim appropriations.
Harry has a question.
I'm sorry? Oh,
Just-
Harry?
Just for information, I did a calculation, the $2.7 million that we have to tax for Nathaniel Witherell is about 0.75 mill rate,
Right.
just so the public understands the impact of that. And that's, never mind the 2.3 that comes out of fund balance,
Which is previously taxing.
previously taxed. So you can really double it and say Nathaniel Witherell's hit the taxpayers for about 1.5.
And as I pointed out, so many other expenses are embedded in our town expenses too. That was part of the previous conversation. I think the cost per bed now at their losses is running something like $35,000 per bed per year, just to kind of put it into a different perspective. Okay, Roland, I'm sorry, these things keep, sort of coming out of
That's it, we're down to the
property taxes.
property taxes, and the grand list at this point is only gone up 0.5%.
So,
And I spoke to Lauren again today, and she doesn't really feel comfortable at all going above this right now until she does the work. She thinks we're going to take a significant reduction in motor vehicles
Right.
because of the way they're calculating the values now. And some things came off. I believe the trailers are no longer taxed, and something else. I don't think that's going to change the total taxes that most people pay, because if you're paying less on your vehicles, you're going to pay a little bit more on your home. So I don't think it's going to impact people too much that way, but there's not a lot of growth in the grand list.
so I think it particularly lowers the tax on those people who are buying new vehicles. I think because the first year, there's a lot more depreciation than there was under the previous program, as I understand it. But I do, she thinks that later on she'll have a better handle, but this is the best that she can do at this point in time. Do we need to end our meeting now? 2:30? So, okay, and the other things I think are, whatever. So, shall we leave it here and then talk about the text at another meeting, set up a special meeting for the text? Talk about the text?
Well, certainly they go hand in hand. And again, I'll raise my question about how we're going to use this versus how we're deploying it in the text. I have a little trouble making changes. Well, anyway, certainly there are numbers on this sheet that I think need to be modified for good financial planning and just a difference of opinion on the assumptions that have been made here. The text itself, again, only recently received, so it's very hard to go, but there's a lot there that I think before we get to a version that I think this board considers voting on needs to be discussed and modified. I don't know, process and timing is the issue.
So, I guess, would you like to hold a special meeting?
Well, we're in a quandary, right? Because this board had always approved these in October. We know that departments are working on their budget. I believe the Board of Ed's budget is probably baked at this point. They're presenting it to the public in 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. So yes, there are little changes they can make, but the value of what we're doing, I worry about the value, right? We can put our statement out there. I don't know how much gets adjusted, but where we're sitting right now, certainly I don't see how this board can act before Monday night's BET meeting and give anybody enough time, to review what we're proposing. So I don't have a proposal. I mean, yes, we should be working on this. We should try to get it done. This board can have a special meeting. It would require also the BET to have the special meeting if we determine that we need to act before mid-November.
So, I mean, clearly, one of the things that's also happening is by the time we get to the full-day meetings in February, some of this information is stale. And, as we talk here with Pete and Roland, or even heard, through the HR committee earlier today, that so much is just almost premature to put these numbers to. So we're all working with what we can do. And, when you're thinking about this October, November, December, January, February, it's 4 months before we're going to be, really talking and going through these budgets. And, we expect a substantial number of these things. We know we make a substantial number of changes in February just for the passage of time for these. So, I would say we just, we have these numbers. They really haven't changed since for a long time. And, maybe we go offline and think about what needs to be accomplished. Unless you
So-
have some other brilliant idea. You've already closed up your book and we haven't even approved the minutes yet.
I haven't closed my book up. Well, frankly, I will say, I'm not sure that there is any, I probably should close up my book because, in all honesty, I think the guidelines have just become a number exercise and have no value at this point. If you don't put them out, in a timely enough way to help shape the input from the departments, their utility is very low. And if you don't have any clue as to what the capital picture is, and you punt it because we don't know, we just don't know, then we have a gaping hole. And so, to my mind, to a large extent, it's purely going through the motions at this point. And so I'm not sure whether the guidelines have any utility. Having said that, I'm certainly willing to sit down and, work through, but it is going to have to wait till next week because, again, I only saw this yesterday, and it's going to have to wait until next week after the BET meeting. I'm certainly willing to spend the time to go through what we can and see where we can go, but frankly, I'm not very optimistic. We're not even trying, we're really not even trying. There's not even an attempt to try. But let's see what we can do. We can always turn the page and give it a fresh look next week. That's
So,
my take.
David, just so you know, I certainly, any one of us could have gone through the published capital book with all the blue sheets and looked at those numbers, August, July, whatever, each one of us. And I went through every sheet and I did look at all the numbers, okay? I looked at the numbers, I found the numbers daunting. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done based on what we've approved already. And, it's not only approving the projects, it's completing the projects and getting the reimbursements for the projects that we said we were going to get when we approved them. So it's a whole process. But, quite frankly, I did that. And any one of us could have done that too. The information is public. Each one of us has a budget book. Each one of us has the capital book for fiscal year 25, and we could have gone sheet by sheet. And I certainly did that and laid out the numbers on a spreadsheet and to see, okay, what's realistic, what isn't realistic. The bottom line is there are new projects, the departments are the same way. Go back and look at what we had in call it the 5-year capital plan for fiscal year 25 done in fiscal year 24, and then go back and then see what was approved. This disparity.
Can we just talk
Sure.
process and calendar? That's all.
Okay.
The directive.
Okay.
So Madam Chair, how do you want to proceed?
Well, I said, I'm prepared to be flexible, to meet and go through what needs to be accomplished. I've suggested Friday, set up a meeting for Friday, but David doesn't seem to be ready. So what would you
No,
suggest?
I have a conflict on Friday. Monday I could do, happy to do Monday.
We could do Monday. I mean, it's always been my objective to get these done in October. Monday does give us 4 days to have some discussions back and forth among ourselves.
Well, today, what's Monday?
21st.
21st. And today's the 16th.
Yeah.
15
No.
days.
Monday is totally open for me. I'm totally flexible.
I can be flexible on Monday.
I too.
Leslie?
Okay, let's meet Monday.
We
Wanna
suggest in the
do-
morning.
So we say, what time works for you? 10 o'clock? 9 o'clock? I mean, I'm early riser, so, I can do it.
The
It's not a
earlier-
matter of sleeping, it's a matter of what else has to
Earlier the
get done that
better.
day.
9 o'clock?
All right, 9 o'clock
9
Monday.
o'clock?
9 o'clock Monday. We'll set up a meeting to proceed discussion of budget guidelines, 9 o'clock Monday.
Samantha, can you check and see if the cone room's available at 9 o'clock on Monday? Since this room is taken up for early voting?
While she's doing that, can we proceed to minutes or?
Oh, yes. Okay, so I think the minutes that are out for approval, September 10th. Do I have a motion to approve September 10th, 2024 minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
So,
I included all your changes.
yeah, and that was just to, did you agree on the reduction
Yes.
in the text?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll
I
second.
think it's fine.
I sent it out to all of you. Okay, moved by Leslie
Harry.
Moriarty,
Or
who did it?
did you
I
make-
moved it.
Harry moved it.
Harry Fisher moved, Leslie Moriarty second.
We need to know who, because we may be able to bump them.
Yeah, Samantha could, we'll find a spot.
Samantha, if it looks like it's open, why don't you just put our name down there and then we'll confirm that. Are you, put our name down first and then you can, whatever, follow up. So tentatively, we'll be there Monday morning at 9 o'clock.
Okay, should we vote on the minutes?
I'm sorry?
I'm in favor, yes.
Those in favor?
Aye.
So I was going to have a brief chairs report. We had a couple items that we've been working on in the past. I think the Affordable Housing Trust is going to come
No, they
back
were-
in November. Pete Minarski and Bill Finger were each doing some additional legal and other research on it.
Leslie, excuse
So
me.
we said this,
We had 2 sets of minutes to approve.
well,
July 9th? They haven't been circulated? Or is there something, okay, fine.
so, I'm sorry, did we vote on the minutes for
Yes,
July 10th?
this is
Okay.
unanimous.
Okay, and then I just made the comment,
It's an outside group? Okay. Greenwich Realtors?
is Mazda available, that they could use Mazda? We're talking to,
It's just we don't, it's not taped then.
I'm saying if they could move
For
to
them.
Mazda,
Oh,
was my
they
point.
can-
If they can move to Mazda.
Okay, thanks,
So,
Don.
okay, maybe someone can work with them to get them into Mazda, and we'll use the cone room. okay?
And if
Otherwise,
not, I guess we'd have to meet in
otherwise,
Mazza,
we can be in Mazza, but, let's see if they can go into,
another room.
okay? So we're going to do it at 9 o'clock on Monday, likely the cone room.
Room TBD.
But, we'll communicate with each other, or there'll be an agenda. So do I have okay, so the next meeting will be scheduled for Monday, the 21st of October at 9 a.m. It's a special meeting of the Budget Committee. And then our meeting thereafter will be on, or at least Wednesday, November 13th. So
Motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
moved by Leslie Moriarty, seconded by Harry Fisher. Those in favor? 400. Thank you.
Thank you.